Hey guys, you're listening to the Wise Words Book Club, where we scale down some of the best non-fiction books and we give you their key ideas. We teach you how to apply them to the real world and how to benefit from them. So if you're looking to improve or looking to grow, then why not listen to some wise words? Words that make you wise.
So today we're going to be discussing a more beautiful question by Warren Berger. I believe it's pronounced that, or Berger. I don't.
Berger?
Berger.
I think it is Berger.
Who is a self-proclaimed question, not master, question researcher. He was an ex-journalist, I believe, from the beginning paragraph, and he talks about how he kind of realized the common theme between everything he was seeing from top innovators to top businessmen to top thinkers in this sort of specific niches were all great at questioning. So then he decided to start studying questioning. He interviewed loads of famous people from big design firms like IDEO, and all to sort of hone his sort of thesis on how to ask good questions. And yeah, it was quite, to be honest, I found this a super important book.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the books that I would say, would it say changed my life a bit? Yeah, I guess it does. It kind of really sells you on this idea that as a society in general, we are so used to having answers to everything that we forget on how important the skill questioning is. And like one of his main theses is not only is it that we're ingrained from a young age from school not to ask questions, but also we have things like Google, which also imply to us that
There's an answer for everything.
there is always an answer for everything.
Yeah.
And we forget that actually the answers that are given to us at the moment are just the current answers that we think are correct, not the actual truth.
Yeah.
And that I think one of his most interesting points, I don't want to sort of dive too deep into it already, but was that answers are relative, not like absolute. So like,
Yeah.
because the world is changing so quick and is always changing, answers aren't just static. They aren't like, that's the answer, that's the rule, that's it, it's done. Answers change as the times change.
Yeah.
Like a good idea now was not a good idea 20 years ago. For example, I'm going to set up a petrol store back when there was horse and carriage. That'd be bloody stupid. But
Yeah.
now that there's cars, the answer changes, right? Of what's useful, what's not useful. And that's quite an interesting idea to think about it because we never really think about that. We just think of absolutes like, oh, that's the truth, or that's the answer to this question. I think one of his interesting points that got to me a bit was how even Einstein and people were fooled by this idea that. So do you remember chemistry?
Do I remember it?
Yeah, like he's in the atomic
Bits of
structure,
it, yeah.
right? So, like for example, at the atomic level, you have like the nucleus, and then you have like an electron circle going around.
Yeah.
It was commonly believed that they orbited like planets, and even Einstein and people believe that, but it turns out that's not the case. And it's just
Yeah.
interesting to know that how even the smartest people in the world can believe something which actually isn't true.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's the ability to question the systems that we put in place. You know, like you just said with your example of the, petrol opening a petrol station. It like things are specific to that context in that point in time, but time changes and so do the contexts. And so naturally an answer will not be continue to be right forever, more so in physics, but outside of that, a lot of systems we don't question, so we don't update. And I think before we dive into it, a point I want to add on to the idea that Google has all these answers is that we live in this kind of climate, this environment where because there are these places where people can just go to get basic answers. It means that the value of answers goes down and the value for questioning goes up. And so you're more likely to be hired on your ability to question, to think outside the box, to think up of things that, there aren't answers to yet and that you have to pursue and you have to try and understand to get these answers. And so the value of questioning is so important. You don't want to be able to be like, oh, well, I know everything that Google already knows because they could just use fucking Google, realistically.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. On that sort of note, I quite like this. He kind of has a critique of expertise, or he kind of goes in on experts in general because he says stuff like, an expert is somebody who stops thinking because they know the answer.
Yeah.
So if you know the answer, there's no reason to ask. So, but then also, if you don't ask the question, then you're relying on expert knowledge. So if you don't ask the question yourself, you then have to rely on an expert to give you an answer.
Yeah, yeah,
And his point is that as the world changes so quickly, and as answer fact questions should be changing first of all, but the fact that our answers tend to be outdated and can be wrong. But the problem is, sorry, we put such an onus on expertise. Like, think of the whole university system. It basically is building experts in specific areas,
oh yeah,
and and they always talk about like how you shouldn't have an opinion on something if you're not an expert. And I do agree with that too. But at the same time, the experts should be held accountable to simple questions. But not many people ask them simple questions.
yeah,
Like, I think one of the classic examples is we all measure economic success through GDP. But have we ever asked the question, why are we measuring GDP? Like, the simple question is, why are we doing that? But the experts, they wouldn't even know how to answer that question because they haven't thought about it either.
yeah,
Because they just
yeah, yeah. But that's the
possible.
thing. It's like, when you are an expert, you're an expert because you've experienced a lot up until that point. But it means that you've also narrowed in to be a specialist, to be an expert in your sort of field, which
Yeah,
means that you have a different way of looking at something, a more precise way of looking at something. And it means that you've accumulated habits in ways that you shouldn't think. But those ways that you shouldn't think can also help you sometimes. So like an amateur or a rookie, who doesn't know anything about it, can come with a really like open, broad view. Um, and they can see things that experts can't, because experts have already like, put that to the side and be like, oh, well, I don't think like that, you know?
yeah,
So like, I think constantly questioning how you think about things rather than like, you know, going on a one track side. Yeah, I think it's so important.
yeah. He also there's a book called like The Beginner's Mind or something, and he even quotes something from that saying like, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the experts there are few.
Yeah.
So, like, this idea that sometimes suspending judgment, or suspending this idea that you know what the case is, and actually questioning it from a perspective of like, if you didn't know what's happening, why is this the case? Like, back to my thing about why are we measuring GDP? It's these questions that experts just don't even think about. Like, why are we even starting with this? I think another interesting example he gave was like, what is our school system measuring? Like, or what is the purpose of school? That was it. Like, we've forgotten, why are we sending kids to school, or why are they learning the things they're learning?
Yeah.
We can't accept it as it has been done in the past, and we don't actually ask like the question of like, what is the purpose? And like, I think one of the main points in the book is the purpose of school, or the way it currently is, where you learn like facts
Yeah.
and you learn answers, is to prepare people for a life of industrial work
Well,
where they have
that's
to
yeah,
know the process and
exactly.
stuff. Um, so like, his point is, or the point in general is, have we actually reassessed the new situation? Is, do we actually need more people to just follow process, believe in
Mm.
facts?
Yeah.
Whereas the world has become way more sort of knowledge worker orientated, where we need to sort of ask questions and understand different ways of doing things. And that schooling system is not set up for that type of worker, basically.
Yeah.
And we should really get to the fundamental questions of why the thing exists.
It's quite interesting, I think, like to touch on your point about like the industrial era, like that's a perfect example of a completely different like time and context. You were at a point where there were so many warehouses that you needed people doing basically kind of mundane things, but like kind of like a Ford, conveyor belt kind of situation. Whereas now we're in a completely different environment, and we should want people to like question things, and it needs to be like forward looking. They need to be like venturing into areas that people haven't gone, rather than regurgitating all the same answers but in different ways. You go on the
Sure.
internet now, and realistically, to be fair, we're literally doing this with a book right now, but it's more about like, oh, he's done the same thing as I have, but I'm just going to say it in a different language. But it needs to be like forward, yeah, going forward, venturing into areas that you haven't gone into before. um I think that's where the questioning like opens those areas up, and then you can venture into them.
I think another thing I thought quite interesting, back on the same topic about like schools and sort of education and not losing perspective of where we are, is so actually not only is the school system set up for, like we just said, the industrial sort of age, is this, I think it was, yeah, a guy called Tony Wagner, I got on my notes. So he says somehow he defined the goal of schooling as enabling you to have more right answers than the person next to you. And not only is it about finding right answers, it's about penalizing wrong answers.
Yeah.
And we've basically been now trained from such a young age to be scared of having the wrong answer. But I think one of the main points is there isn't actually like what back to the relativity of answers. Like it's relative, it's not absolute. They're like, for example, right? How do you become rich or how do you become a millionaire? There is not just one
Yeah,
answer
there's
to
so
it.
many ways.
There are multiple avenues, and it's the same for most things. Like obviously you can be constrained by physics, but the majority of human stuff, there is more than one answer to
Yeah,
the sort
yeah.
the thing you're looking for. Um,
But that's because like the scenario and the climate keeps changing, and so it's adapting to that. You know, if suddenly there's this new kind of technology, then people adapt to that. They take hold of that and then they make it their own. You know, but the people that are still stuck, you know, using, I don't know, a Nokia are probably not as efficient as someone who has a smartphone. Do you know what I mean? It's like you have to take advantage of adapting to your environment and to your climate.
yeah, for sure. I mean, that's enough. I feel like the only way for adaptation is to be consistently, asking questions. So I think one of the main part, or one of the main things he sort of tried to get across in his book is there is actually like a system. There is a slight process to actually asking questions. It starts with why questions, then it moves to what if questions, then it moves to how questions. And like the kind of way this is set up is so the why questions are more about understanding like the particular problem or the particular situation you have. So I think the four whys he suggested is so why does a particular situation exist? Why does it present a problem or create a need? Why has no one addressed this need, or why do you personally think that you could solve this, or something similar? So the why is all about trying to understand and gauge what the current situation is, like the truth
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Then the what if questions are the kind of way you come up with ways to deal with that. So like potential things. So what if I tried doing this? So like let's just say you're stuck in a dead end job. You're like, what if I tried, creating a new product line? What if I tried a different approach here? Like if you're a salesperson, what if I tried by smiling when I first called? So you're basically trying to, in this stage, brainstorm potential avenues that would help you reach the why, the problem solving solution. And then the last part is like how. So like how might we apply this, or how might we actually go about doing that? So that's like process orientated.
Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting because he basically, yeah, all problems sort of follow this kind of like reasoning. So like, why does this problem exist? Like, what's causing it? Then
Yeah.
the what is like coming up with new ways to tackle it. Then the how is like, how am I actually going to do that? Um,
I think it's quite interesting because he was saying that what is it is a part of the I think it's the what if, or no,
mhm.
maybe it's the why. It's
No, I
like,
think it's more like you're thinking of combination, like making weird combinations, like creativity,
yeah,
or
yeah.
is that
The
what
well, it was more that's another point, but I was gonna say the fact that like when you look at something, you can have, or when you question things, they're built up of like kind of biases, you know, or how you see the world, but you kind of want to refine, like get out of that so that you can think more broadly. And he talks about like using the five whys, like ask the question and then say why that question and then why that question. And you do it like five times so that you kind of detach yourself from all your kind of like, you know, biases or, you know, things that you prefer to look at or prefer to look at the world in a certain way. And this gives you a broader kind of more objective view in a sense. And then what touching on what you were saying in terms of like, you know, your the ability to what if, instead of, he uses an example like, do not merely ask what if we combine A and B, but rather ask like what if we combine A and Z. You know, it's like associative inquiry, or he talks about it in what's
connective
it,
inquiry? I think he calls it.
yeah, convert wait, is it divergent thinking, in terms of
Oh
like,
right, yeah.
yeah, triggering like random associations,
Mhm.
things that are so far from each other that you wouldn't normally think that they could link, but then you ask a question and, well, what do you know, they happen to work out.
Yeah.
um yeah.
Yeah, he uses a fantastic example in the book, actually, that reminds me. He talks about this guy who, I can't remember the reason why he lost his foot or he lost his leg.
Oh
But
yeah.
anyway, he was the guy who came up with the prosthetic
Yeah,
legs, which helped Oscar Pistorius win the sort of, the sort of springboard
yeah,
based
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And like, I just found it really interesting because he basically started walking on like the type of prosthetics they had back then, right? And which was
Yeah.
apparently just absolutely crap, really painful, couldn't really walk properly. And he started asking a load of why questions, like why is it like this? Why? And then this is what I found quite interesting is when he got past that stage of like why is it like this? Is because nobody's thought about it. Okay, and then
Yeah.
he started asking questions like what if he started studying like cheetahs and the way their legs moved,
Mm.
and then he also looked at diving boards and he's like, what if I could apply like the diving springboard onto a leg, and what if I could use he curved it as well, like
Yeah.
oh god, I can't even remember where he got the inspiration from. But anyway, what you're saying is he was pulling away from A to Z. Like not many people were thinking, oh, they were thinking like, oh, how can I make it look like a leg? Where he was thinking, how can I make it feel really good, or how can I perform well on it, or how can I run as fast as I used to run? And he was looking at it from a different angle, like how can I use a springboard to increase the pace or increase the fat? Because he was a runner as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Um,
But that's exactly it. It depends on like how you measure it or how you're looking at something. If you wanted to design a leg that like, is the fastest leg or the strongest leg, there's a different way to look at it, and your questions kind of direct you in different ways how to see something. And I think like some to add on, I remember I think part of the book when he was talking about that example
mhm.
was how he went about it. And like this, the how part of the questioning. So it's kind of like the how part is like a prototype, and like a prototype is basically a question embodied. But nothing's ever going to be perfect unless you test it out. And he
Mhm.
kept on going. He kept on like making one prosthetic leg, and then it didn't work, or this was off, or that was off, and then he went back and he did it again, and goes through this whole why, what if, how process, constantly going around until it's refined and it's what he kind of wants, or it's going in the right direction. And I'm assuming like this company that he started up would have been like it's probably still going now. I don't actually know the company, but I'm assuming that they've innovated a hell of a lot, since that time.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's just mental, isn't it? But like, I'm yet to read the next book, which is one of the ones I want to get. It's like How Innovation Really Works by Matt Ridley, who's a
Mm,
biologist. But I'm convinced it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be sort of feedback, like scientific process orientated. Like you test a hypothesis, is this going to work? It doesn't work. You refine it. You try and figure out why it didn't work,
yeah,
and you repeat that again and again and again. Um, I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that's the easiest way ever to achieve success would be just refining via that sort of process.
yeah,
Test something. What if you did it differently? Oh, it didn't work. Try and test it again. Work out what was the problem, and just keep going until you get to where you want to be.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. It's all about like, first of all, it's about you don't know if you need to question something until you need to question it, really. So it's like you kind of have to maintain awareness, right? You
Yeah,
have to be aware that there is like our reality is not the only reality. We can change our reality. And for that to happen, we need to be aware. And once we're aware, then we see like the holes in our society, in our reality. And then we can be like, well, why is that like that? You know? And then what if it was like this? And how do I change that? It's all about like being able to see these areas that you can question and be like, okay, well, what if I was to change that? You know? But without us being aware or seeing that these systems kind of need updating, then we're kind of like ignorant to it. And like, yeah, and it's very hard to like, you kind of need to be kind of woken up in a sense.
and you can only be woken up in my head by asking why something exists in the first
Yeah,
place, or questioning if there's a better way of doing something that exists.
yeah,
Like one of his main points was all these master sort of questioners or innovative people have a refusal to accept like existing reality. So they
yeah,
always refusal to accept that the way we currently do things is the best way,
yeah,
and that they're always going to find a better way.
yeah. But it's like anything. It's like a skill, isn't it? It's like if you haven't really questioned things, then you probably aren't going to suddenly like suddenly start questioning everything. But like everything, it's if you start questioning, then it becomes easier. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And then it's like almost automatic in a sense. You can look at something and you kind of have like questioning is curiosity in a sense, isn't it? It's you're basically igniting curiosity. You can look at things, and because you have this automatic way of looking at things and questioning them, you'll be like, oh gosh, well, what if I was to do this? And you're not even like, I'm not going to invent the new phone, but it's a different way of looking at the world. You could be like, fuck, well, what if I could do this with my phone? Or what if I had that? Or what if I could create an app that could do this? It's
Mm.
a curious way of looking at the world. And the curiosity is that kind of forward momentum. You're always looking forward. You're always interested in what's to come or what you can create.
Yeah, I think on that kind of topic where like talking about questioning, I think he proposed quite an interesting idea about like the formula of innovation. He goes like questioning and then acting on it equals innovation.
Mm.
And what you're saying here is like the thing is a lot of us are actually quite good questioners, but then it's actually acting on it. So like
Yeah.
questioning minus action equals philosophy, and I
Yeah.
quite like
I like that.
because it's like you can sit there and be like, oh, okay, is it really like oh, is this really necessary? And you're right, then that you're basically philosophizing. If you're like, is this really necessary? I'm going to find a better way to do it. Or like, what if I did this? That's how you innovate.
Yeah.
So I think also it's quite interesting. So this book's all about obviously asking more questions, but I think one of the other main theses, which he doesn't really talk about as much, is asking questions and then taking action.
Yeah.
But for me, the only way you can take action, right? Okay, so I think this is where his like process is quite interesting for people. So it's like why, what if, how. When you get to the what if stage, that's when you're actually going to generate the potential for action.
Mm.
The why doesn't potentially like create action, does it? The why is just trying to understand what's the situation, what's the truth. When you start doing like, what if we did this, or how might we do this, you're then basing that on action or some sort of change of the reality. So that's where the innovation actually comes in.
Yeah.
Anything is fine. It's great to ask more questions. Fantastic. We need more people asking why we're fucking doing things. But we also need more people going like, what if we did it differently and actually trying it? And that is where innovation, entrepreneurship all comes in my head.
Yeah.
It's the people who see something or as a problem and go like, why are we still fixing it the same way? You know,
Yeah.
why are we still doing this way? Why are we still using horse and carriages when you can use the combustion engine to turn wheels and create a car?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that type of thinking like is it like this isn't good enough? We need to update. For example, I'm convinced there must be a new social media at some point in the next few years.
Oh, there will have to be.
Point of like questioning, right? Facebook, what the hell is it doing now? Why are we in this state of the world because of like social media, etc. What can we do about it? What if it was different? What if we didn't have an advertising model? What if you had a subscription
Yeah.
model? Where you pay to be part of it and you don't get advertised to or fed fake news.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
Create a barrier to entry. Therefore, for example, now anybody can set up a Facebook account, right? Anybody can set up so you can get bots because it doesn't cost. The moment something costs, you can't get bots because otherwise every bot's going to cost you a fortune.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and there you go. Somebody can steal that idea. Go for it. Um, I can't bother to do that. That's
But
just
no, it is that, and you see these kind of transitions in with social medias or companies or whatever. But that is exactly the environment changing. It's never going to be static. It's always going to be changing. And so, like you see Facebook, and then Instagram comes along, and then Facebook buys Instagram, and then and then Snapchat starts, and then WhatsApp and Twitter, and all these different ones. And so it's constantly like an evolution of them, but then it all is probably dependent on what we kind of want, like what society is looking for. You know,
mm,
a society was looking for a place to upload loads of photos and comment and likes and shit like that. And then they can adapt and like add on, little touches here and there. But, it's all about like kind of seeing what society wants. But you would have to question to be able to see that. It's like, oh, well, what do people want to do on their phones these days?
yeah, I would say that, but I'd also say you have to question the reality, like the consequences of what they're doing. Like, I think more of Facebook, the problem they're going to have now is people are going to start questioning, like, what is their actual purpose? They're not actually serving a socially beneficial
Yeah.
purpose. If anything, they're making the world worse, and they're also spreading. It's not their, to be honest, it's not really their fault. The problem is they're just an open platform, and they means they can be taken advantage of by people who have nefarious agendas.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the problem. But yeah, I think it comes to a point. This is back down to answering the question. Oh, sorry, asking questions based on a new reality. Like the reality of Facebook has changed. When it first came about, it was all about connecting with friends and family,
Mm.
and now it's changed. The new reality is it's an advertising platform, which is also highly political and is feeding people shit in
Yeah.
their mind, basically. Um, so that's what I mean. It's the new reality. It's like, right, hang on a second, why does Facebook exist? Like, what if it was done differently? How might we do it differently? And hopefully, there's people tackling those tough questions. It's about time for me to disturb them or change the status quo at the moment. It's a bit.
Yeah.
We're always optimizing for like GDP growth and whatever, but who the hell in the first place decided that was the best metric to
Yeah.
measure a
Yeah.
country's success or whatever by? And I think it's really interesting how forward-thinking countries like Norway and stuff,
Yeah.
they all question this idea of like what it is to make a country successful, what makes people happy in a country, and like
Yeah.
are we following a false god? Like GDP, the economics machine, is that a false god? Probably. But this is what I mean. The whole point of questioning is like, why are we even doing this in the first place? What if we chased a different goal, and how might we collectively come together and do that?
Yeah.
That's what I mean by this sort of process. I love it. It makes a lot of sense whenever you have a problem. Now it's like, why does it exist?
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's so important. Like a perfect example is like uh the Declaration of Independence kind of thing in America. You know, like the 13th Amendment with guns. You know, it made perfect sense when you had like muskets and like an unbroken kind of government, that kind of situation.
mhm,
But that was what 250 years ago or whenever.
mhm,
Um, it's completely different context now. You know, where you can buy a fucking MP5 or shit like that. Like that's ridiculous.
mhm.
So yeah, it's all dependent on the context, and it's always changing. And the thing is, when you put in these systems, you will automatically find people that take advantage of them. Like you were saying with Facebook, you know, it's not really Facebook's fault, but you'll find people that
They
take
should still be
advantage.
held accountable for it, and they should be, sort of figuring out ways to snuff it out. But they're
Yeah,
still, you get me?
but that's where you find people that like make these kind of additions to it. You know, they notice that someone is taking advantage of it and being
Mhm.
nefarious, and then it's like, okay, well, what can I do that can create this better? That's why you constantly see these things kind of changing over time. Um, which once again is people seeing a hole, questioning it, and then acting on it.
Yeah, I think, Thomas, we could touch on. There was a big chapter on it, about why we've stopped questioning as a society.
Hmm.
So we kind of touched on it earlier about schools. So we've got a system which rewards answers and punishes wrong answers.
Yeah.
Um, and almost in a sense, I think one of the main points was as well because the teachers are so pressurized to get a syllabus across and obviously teach the kids like the correct answer for tests. They don't have time to entertain questions. I think there was some interesting data. I don't really know exactly the exact statistics of it, but there was a few graphs he showed in the book. I don't know if you remember it, where it was like the amount of questions you ask at your age, and it basically after you hit like
Oh
5 or 6,
yeah.
it drops off.
Yeah.
Okay, and then he also compared that to the level of engagement at school, and basically exactly the same time questions get stopped being asked, the engagement drops. And I think one of his main points was like when you ask a good question or take ownership of a question, like you thought about yourself, like for example, I think one of them was like, "Why is the sky blue?" It's actually a very, very hard question to answer.
Yeah.
There's some weird sort of fragmentation of photons or something like that, right? When you come up with good questions and teachers entertain it, um, the kids will take ownership and be more engaged. So, for example, I've already thought that's quite a lot. When I have kids, when they come to me with questions I don't know the answer to, I'm going to help them explore it
Yeah.
and we're going to figure out the answer together. And then over time, obviously, they're going to take agency, and I'm not going to have to do it too. But the whole point is, it's showing them that when you don't have an answer, it's very fulfilling to go after and find it out.
Yeah.
Because that is essentially what all geniuses and innovators have ever done. They've just thought of a question, and then they've just basically surrounded their whole life trying to figure out this one question. Literally. I mean, you could even say McDonald's is around one question of how can I make sure fast food is done within five
Yeah.
minutes and how can it be tasty? Like that, that's literally was like I think one of the points as well was most companies can be sort of thought about as just like one question that they're
Hmm.
trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Back to the prosthetic legs. How can I make prosthetic legs that can help me run?
Yeah.
Um, this is the same thing. It's like they're all pretty much doing the same sort of. They have a question. How can I create this reality? And then
Yeah.
they just go after it. Um,
Well, you need like an open questions. To be fair, like if you have closed questions with just yes or no answers, it stops right there. It's like you're already creating your finish line. You don't pursue it any further. I think like touching on your point about like when a kid asks you why the sky is blue, or they start asking you questions like that, you might answer one and then they go why again, and then you answer that one and they ask you why again, and it gets to a point where you don't even know the answer. So then
yeah,
you have to be like, a lot of parents will be like, it just is like that. But then what
yeah.
you do is you stop that kid's curiosity, and they're
Mhm.
like, that's where the finish line is. Unless they come across it later on, they're really interested in it. That's kind of their mental idea of that subject. But yeah, you like you said, like just follow it, just keep going. Obviously, this is all dependent on like context. You know, if you're fucking tired and you come back from a long day at work and your kid is constantly asking you questions, it's probably pretty annoying. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's one of his main points. It was like actually most parents can like they can entertain it for a while,
yeah,
and then it just gets. But basically, actually, what his main point was, what happens is the kids make you realize you don't know anything.
yeah, Yeah.
The kids eventually get you to the point where you're like, actually, do you know what? I don't know the answer to that, so shut up. Like, I don't know how many people could actually answer the truth of why is the sky blue. I think one of the common misconceptions is a reflection of the sea, but actually, from what I saw in that book, it was actually something else. It was something to do with the fragmentation of like, I can't even remember exactly. It was something to do with if it reflects off the sea, then it reflects off like the gas in the air. It's something
Fucking hell,
ridiculous. I've
yeah.
never really thought about it before, but
And
yeah,
but why?
yeah, exactly. Why? Well,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
yeah,
It's
I
fucking
guess
hard to
I think
pinpoint.
actually, another funny point you made was like if you actually just kept asking why, you get down to the point of like humans are just like insignificant part of the whole universe.
Yeah.
And really massive. You just kept going. So
It's a very nihilistic view.
yeah, yeah, but that's where we're at with human knowledge.
Yeah.
Like there is because nobody can answer that question. At
Yeah.
the moment, the only answer is there is nothing that matters. If you get me,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe apart from I guess religion and stuff has answers where something does matter. But yeah, um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think touching on your point about companies, he talks about it in one of his chapters, but with the idea that you need to have a question that like your company is rooted in, because then it
hmm
means like every time, and this kind of like applies to what is it, Dan and Chip Heath's Make It Stick. You have a kind of template in which your company is rooted to. Same thing for like a question. If you constantly have a question related to every single product, then every time you get that product in, you're like, oh, is this doing what my question is wanting?
yes. No,
Um
100% makes so much truth. Like, yeah, you're completely correct, and it's exactly what you're saying. Where it's like, don't have how companies have mission statements.
yeah,
He was like, they should be question statements.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like, for example, Tesla's might be, how can we make the Earth just like the whole population of Earth more sustainable? Something
yeah,
like that. I don't know. Or like, how can we create electric cars that the majority of people on the Earth can afford and like drive? And that would help him achieve his mission, I guess, of making the Earth more sustainable. If you kind of get me, but like,
yeah,
it's about embodying that question. And like you just said, any decision making they can do then will be they sat there like so. So we're focusing on how we can make it affordable for everybody to have the car, and
yeah,
then they start making decisions based on how can they make the car cheaper by looking at the costs,
yeah.
and that would completely unify their sort of vision. And yeah, let's put it this way: if I ever had a company big enough now, I'd definitely be figuring out what the main question is I'm trying to fix or solve, and or making sure every big high level decision is,
But also, it makes all your employers inquisitive as well, because you have this environment based around this like question. So it makes them be more inquisitive. Like he says, like a drawback of this is that a connotation to questioning is like challenging authority, and
yeah,
so a lot of people don't want to do it. But he gives like an example, like having an anonymous questioning platform where people can vote or downvote, a question. But I think that is incredibly important because once again, like, if it is forward thinking, if it is like philosophizing or innovative, then, you want everyone in your kind of company to be kind of doing that, to push your company forward, to make it grow, to make it progress.
well, yeah. I mean, to be honest as well, he was talking mainly about like, people like Steve Jobs and stuff, and it's just also about questioning what you do already.
Yeah.
Like they were apparently relentless. Like Steve Jobs, like how might we do this better?
Yeah.
And oh my god, there's a really interesting point that he made. So there's schools in Missouri, I believe, that have been called known as sorry, the pupils being called the Missouri Mafia. But basically, the whole point was the schooling system was built around asking really big questions.
Mm.
Basically, everybody who came from that includes Jeff Bezos, includes a
Oh,
guy Chris,
really?
includes Larry and Sergey Brin, so the Google founders, all
Yeah.
came from that state of schools where they were basically relentlessly focused on asking questions like how might we do this differently, how might we do this better, and like the in the book he was talking about how Sergey and so the Google basically founders were literally relentless, and people were well known to like think that these guys just all they did was just consistently be like, why are we doing it this way?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Bezos is exactly the same.
Oh, yeah.
Like he's always said, like he calls it what's it called, day one mindset. So he's like he doesn't want to use processes to justify things. He should always be thinking like, is it still relevant to do this now?
Mm.
Knowing what technology we now have, or can we build technology to replace this job? For example, at one point he created a bot which would then go to his competitor's website, see their price, and then change the price on his site.
Yeah. Fucking hell.
You know what I mean? Like you could have had somebody manually doing that, but he created it because he realized it would be of value
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
consistently be beating the price of all these people.
Yeah.
But that's the level of it. It's yeah.
I wonder why it hasn't kind of caught on so much then.
Oh, because people hate questions, mate.
But yeah, it's ridiculous though, like when you can see that it clearly has a fucking good impact.
Ego, people scared to
Yeah,
admit they're wrong. It's a lot of things, mate. And especially, I think a lot of it is actually just ego, and it's people up top that
yeah,
don't be
yeah,
told what to do and don't want to be made to feel small. Like, literally, I'm convinced it's that. And then, therefore, it's all up for the taking for the people who do.
yeah. That attitude just needs to change so much. I think like
What do you think, mate? It's biological in my head.
yeah,
Because people want status, right? And one of the best ways to have status is to have power. Therefore, they can't recede it to anybody. Or,
yeah.
like,
But
basically.
if a system takes that into account, into an account, like
Let's put it this way: I'm convinced most people actually end up being punished by companies that cut up and come and sort of undercut them completely. The people who are like claim they know everything.
yeah.
I don't know.
I think relating this to How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler,
Hmm.
he talks about how schools and like universities basically we question for the wrong things. We question for
Yeah,
information rather than understanding, and so it's
sure.
like it's kind of like a closed answer, you know, in terms of you question something, you just get a yes or no answer, or you just get a fact. But the idea is like you want to be questioning for understanding, so that once you understand it, you can actually apply it.
Yeah,
And then that's like the how stage, isn't it? It's like what if, and then you understand it, and then you can apply it.
yeah, yeah. There is two stages to it, but I do. I guess you have to understand it completely to apply it in the first place, right? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah,
Yeah. I don't know. I'm come to this massive conclusion now that it's always like is always about this questioning ethos. Like the only way you're ever going to be able to adapt to anything is by reevaluating the new situation continuously.
yeah.
Like, in fact, do you know what? Sorry, that's wrong. Because if you did it every single day, you wouldn't get anything done. So I think,
Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be every day, but I think you kind of have to have like a check-in period. You
yeah,
know, like I have a kind of thing in terms of um relating it to like atomic habits in terms
hmm
of when there's like your identity needs to constantly change.
hmm
It's like it's constantly changing, so don't have it static. So I kind of have a thing where like every, I don't know, quarter of a year, every 3 months or so, I'll have like a check-in period and be like, oh, how have I kind of changed?
yeah,
And then how can I adapt my like life to my kind of changed identity? Or like, yeah, and
sure.
then I check in later on. But yeah, if I did that every day, not much would really change.
Yeah, of course. I think yeah, it's like you just said. It's and in fact, an interesting question he recommends as well is like, what if I could start again? I quite like that one in terms of like, let's just say you made a life decision, or
Mm.
let's just say you're in a bit of a rut. I think that's one of his main points. Is like it was the Intel chief Andy Grove or something who basically came up with the question, which like, what if I wasn't in this business right now? What would I do? And sometimes I think we forget like, what if I wasn't in this job right now? If I was
Yeah.
starting fresh, where would my curiosity, where would my life take me? And then start trying to find a way to go down that path
Yeah.
because you shouldn't be stuck somewhere just because you've invested too much time in it. And I think that's what that question kind of tries to highlight is like if you're going down the wrong path and you kind of know it, do something about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a big sense of the reason why people are apprehensive to question things is because of like logistics, you know?
Hmm.
And then I think like a point of his was, say, what if money wasn't a problem, or
Yeah,
what if I wasn't like stuck to this house or this
yeah,
area or this city, It's like there's so many things that are possibly stopping you, but so you don't actually look outside. You don't look outside of the box. But there's so many other, like, there's always pretty much an answer to something. You just need to
yeah,
find it. You just need to question it.
no, for sure.
Yeah.
One last one actually, which I quite liked, which is kind of on the topic of like business mainly, but it can also be team, anything communally orientated towards a goal, like yeah, team sport, whatever. This guy talks about this idea that organizations or teams gravitate towards the questions they ask. So, for example, if the questions they ask are like, "Why are we behind? Who is to blame?" then you're more likely to end in a culture where people like are
Mm,
finger pointing and guard, like basically try not to make mistakes. But if they are more positive, like, "Oh, what can we learn from this? What did we do that was good?" Like positive orientated
changes the
questions,
language.
not even just changing language, but it changes the whole mood of the team, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in a team that's always pointing fingers, going, "Oh, who's to blame for that?" Like, "Oh, why did that go wrong?" Like, you could think of it as like, "What can we learn from
Yeah.
this?" It's a complete different mindset shift. And if you were repeatedly asking those within an organization or a sport team, you would find a completely different result in the long run, I would have thought, because one of them basically fosters an idea, like a culture of pointing fingers at each other, and then therefore risk averse behavior. And then one of them talks about learning from mistakes. Therefore, people are more likely to often to do stuff which would make a mistake, but then they're going to learn,
Mm.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of
And
sense.
you can have it even with your friend groups as well. And it's like, instead of saying like, I don't know, I would struggle to find a time where it would be necessary. But anyway, like, so instead of like being like, oh, who forgot to do that, or oh, what can we do differently next time? It's just a different way of looking at it. It's
Yeah,
future orientated rather than past, which I also think is quite an interesting point. Where if your questions are future orientated, you can do something about the future.
yeah,
Is past orientated, you can't do anything about the past. It actually becomes a blame game.
yeah,
If you get me, if it's always in the past, like, oh, why didn't we do that? It's just like,
yeah. The past needs to be looked at in like a view of
it's,
learning from.
yeah, it's a view of learning, like what can we do differently.
Yeah,
But that what I mean by that is you're using the past to inform the future.
yeah,
Whereas for who's to blame, you're just looking at the past to
yeah,
just punish somebody. In the present is
yeah,
kind of, yeah, the tense is kind of change what it means.
yeah. No,
But
I just think it can just be applied to everything. Like it really can. It's just so important to. It just wakes you up. You see
yeah,
everything in such a different light.
yeah, no, for sure. It's especially just being conscious that you probably don't ask enough questions in your life. Like, I
Yeah.
think what there was one last point I think I'm going to finish on. It was uh, taking ownership of questions by changing the pronoun to like,
Mm.
for example, let's just say you're in an argument with somebody, like why can't you'll probably be framing it something like, why can't this person just like, change? Why can't this
Yeah.
person do this? You should foster an eye like a, why can't I get past this, or why can't I do something differently?
Yeah.
So you put the ownership back onto what you can control,
Yeah.
and you then, but just by basically framing the question in terms of what you can do, you're almost automatically giving yourself more agency, because you cannot control other people. So the moment you back onto yourself, you're going to have a more profitable sort of questioning area. You're going to find answers which actually can help change your life, rather than trying to change somebody else, which is fundamentally impossible, really,
Yeah.
because you.
Like I think if you if you relate to like the flow concept by I can never say his name Mikali.
Yeah, I know the guy. Yeah,
Mikali. Oh, it's
I know how to
terrible.
pronounce
I should know it by
it.
now. But it's the idea that you have you go through life and then you stumble across something and you need an answer to like get through it, to venture through it. So you
Yeah,
plug in an answer and then it becomes a mental model. And then if that works for a period of time, then it kind of becomes a belief. And then if that belief stays for a long time, then it kind of just is solidified and we don't question it. And there's
yeah,
so many areas of our life that we don't question anymore because
of course.
we're kind of ignorant that we even put an answer in there in the first place you know but then it's not until you come across a different scenario that it suddenly jolts you out and you're like, fuck, okay, well
Yeah,
I need a different answer now. But we just
sure.
need to learn to like question that and jolt ourselves out of solidified answers.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, yeah, we're all just basically walking. Oh, I can't remember what it was. Somebody said the thing. We're just walking conclusions. Like
Yeah.
the way we act and the way we do things is our conclusion of what's right and wrong for that situation.
Yeah.
And the only way you can change those conclusions is by questioning them, or questioning why you've even reasoned that.
Yeah.
I think it's sometimes good to check your reasoning for things, like, why do you actually believe this to be true? Like, how often do we have like a preferred sort of, for example, left and right political views? Like, how often do we actually question, going like, hang on a second, like, why do I actually believe this? Like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
fundamentally drives me to believe this?
Yeah.
And quite a lot of people probably find that actually it's based on they don't like the other opposition, or they don't like the way other people are behaving. But
Yeah.
the problem is, it's like, is it based on actual rational thought, or is it based on just something you thought was rational? But it basically, yeah,
Or just an anchor to something. Like think about how many times that we don't know anything about a certain subject and then something comes on the news and the news
mm,
already like always has an agenda anyway, but
yeah,
that's your first anchor to it. So later on, whenever you have an idea about that kind of subject, it's rooted in that anchor and we've never questioned that anchor.
yeah, yeah. You question what you should always be questioning what you know. Just like, where have I heard this from?
Yeah.
And the only thing you should really truly believe is if something you put like the actual research into.
Yeah.
But yeah, Yeah, questioning is important.
Very
Get
important. Unless you didn't get that for the last 50 minutes, it's important.
Yeah, and I think for me that's pretty much everything, man.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm gonna summarize it again. It's obviously this idea of this sort of questioning cycle. So the why questions first, the what if, then the how is the best way to implement sort of innovation.
yeah,
Um, Apart from that, I guess it's all about understanding that sometimes answers aren't actually answers aren't actually that valuable anymore. It's all about people who can sort of question and try and come up with new ways of doing things, because that's where the sort of value is at.
yeah,
Copying is only going to get you as far as the sort of the roof of the person who you're copying, really.
yeah,
Like fundamentally, copying a company to create this product, which is exactly the same, isn't exactly going to help you go past them. So
exactly.
yeah, if you want to
Exactly.
do anything valuable in life, question, create your own reality, bring it to life, use what if, use how, and yeah, take Facebook down. There you go.
Amen.
Um,
All right.
but that's that, mate.
That's that. That's a wrap. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. If you did, make sure you leave a comment or a review. And if you want to know more about what we do, or you want to read any of our book summaries, head on over to wisewords.blog. And if you feel like staying wise throughout the week, why not follow us on Instagram at @wisewordsummaries. I guarantee you'll love what you see. Anyway, guys, until next time, have a good one.